I know you guys have been worried about me and everything, but, just trust me. I'm not a serial killer. Not at all. I mean, I get 2 freebies, right? It's like, you gotta get to 3?
I don't think that's how it works.
Oh, okay. Well, then definitely be worried.
Wait, what number are you on?
Have you checked your basement lately? And welcome to the UGO podcast, and Netflix and Kill Edition, and man, it's my pick this week, and I, with rare form, have picked a movie I did not see before.
That's pretty hard to find.
But I heard some neat things about it, and I decided to subject not only myself, Nick, the Merc with a mic, to this strange film, but also my co-host here,
Travis. And Kyle.
And yeah, so we watched I Am Not a Serial Killer.
I have rules to keep me normal and to keep everybody else safe. When I think about killing a person, I just give them a compliment. You are a really great guy. You're a freak.
You have a lot of predictors for serial killer behavior, but you're in control of your own destiny.
John.
Yeah, Mr. Crowley?
Oh, it's a beautiful day, John. Makes you glad to be alive.
Killer has struck, leaving a dead body in a terrified town in his wake.
The last thing he's telling me is he's a mass murderer.
You guys worried about going out of business? It's 2 bodies in a week. It's money in the bank. First question of psychological profiling is what's the killer doing who doesn't absolutely have to?
Well, we're missing a kidney.
What if the person who killed him took it?
Which is a very defensive title for a film. Makes me real suspicious about it.
A little bit. Makes you wonder if maybe he might be a serial killer.
But yes, it's a film about a boy in a small town growing up, and he is seeing a therapist because he is showing the early warning signs of being a sociopath and serial killing. Basically, he tortures small animals.
He lacks empathy.
He lacks empathy with other human beings. He doesn't seem to connect with anyone on a kind of a more emotional level at all. He sees people as things rather than people, or so it claims in the beginning of the movie. Anyway, later it seems to get a little more complex, but. Anyway, this town is beset upon by another serial killer, it seems.
An actual serial killer.
Yeah, an actual serial killer. That's some bodies have shown up with organs missing, with certain organs missing every time. So he's trying to figure out, like, through some morbid fascination, it seems, more than anything else, he's trying to figure out who's killing people.
Yeah, he's not even really interested in stopping the murder. He just wants to observe it.
At first it seems like that, but then later it seems like he actually does get invested. It's odd, but we'll get into it. So yeah, that's the basic premise of the film. And this one is going to be might be a shorter section for the non-spoiler edition of Netflix and Kill, because there is a twist kind of halfway through this film.
Yeah.
And
it's actually a little bit earlier than that, I think.
Yeah. It might actually be really early. And I don't know about you guys, but I kind of like the twist.
You also kind of called the twist.
I did kind of call the twist. Sort of, kind of. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Because at the beginning of this film, I thought it was getting a little slow.
Well, not much was happening.
Not a lot was happening. I was kind of like, okay, I kind of see where this is going. It's interesting to see the Dexter type character, see things from a new, like, perspective I've not seen before, someone who lacks empathy and whatnot. And suddenly, I'm like, okay, is this movie going to play out exactly how I think it's gonna? And then the twist happens, and like kind of near it. And even though I called it, I was kind of like, oh shit, there's a little bit of a twist on top of it too. And I was like, oh damn, now I'm kind of perked. I'm suddenly a little more interested in the film, and it actually carried me over to the second act hump a little bit. So there is some narrative things going on in the film that actually are a little bit interesting to me. What do you guys think about the twist?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was interesting. I mean, we can't talk too much about it, but
No.
I kind of liked it because otherwise there wasn't going to be much to the movie.
I can't, I
kept
can't
going-
talk much about it without giving it away. So
Right. So we're not going to be able to talk about that. So this beginning part is going to be kind of a technical level of the film because I have some things to talk about it on a technical level.
Yep.
But narratively, overall, it does some interesting stuff. That's where I feel like the movie is most interesting because it kind of combines a couple genres together. And to where, like, it's a little bit of Dexter mixed in there, but then kind of a Stephen King book, maybe even a little bit of M. Night Shyamalan-y.
Yeah, because I mean, this could have been set in a small town in Maine, right?
Yeah, it could have been. It could have been. It's starring a small psychic child. Man, if that kid was psychic and a serial killer, that would have really not worked out. So there's a couple of characters also in the film. He's living with his mom. His dad is not in the picture. His dad is like a special level dick because he sends him this iPod or whatever, and
MP3 player.
It's supposed to be loaded up with his favorite songs, like a dad playlist. And
Except it was right in the package.
It was in the package, and it's like, whoa, so did he forget to load up the songs, or... Because he wrote the letter saying that, like, there's no mistaking it. He sent the package with the letter, but didn't bother to load up the songs. I'm like, what an asshole. Like, I'd rather not get a gift at all than to get a half gift like that.
Well, it's not as bad as the sister who was just like, I got an animated show that we were supposed to watch when I was younger. I don't remember the fuck out of this show, so fuck them.
And, so, and he also has a best friend who is kind of his sounding board in the beginning of the film. The interesting thing is that the best friend actually disappears through the middle of the film.
Yeah, he's only in like half the film, actually.
Like, and it's weird because his whole point of being there is because we can't really understand what this character is going through because we...
sociopaths.
I would assume most people watching it...
To be fair...
and he's not talking to himself a lot. So he spends a lot of the movie alone, so you're forced to kind of infer a lot of what's going on. And it's a lot harder because this character is a Dexter-like character. Because, you know, in Dexter, which is also a serial killer story, you hear Dexter's narration. And you hear what he's thinking and how he's processing his thoughts when he's setting up a kill room or when he's interacting with people, and he's having a normal conversation on one level, but in his head it's going this weird direction, like he's thinking about all this other weird shit. So when we have this character and we only see things and his actions, it's like it's a little too much of a guessing game sometimes, to where I'm like, I could use a little more clarification of what this guy is going through on an intellectual level. And I feel like the friend character they set up was supposed to be that. It was supposed to be like bouncing ideas off him when he's trying to hunt for the serial killer. And I'm like, oh, well, I mean, it's cliche, but it's
cliche for a reason, because having more than one point of view is always more beneficial to a general audience.
Yeah, that way the kid could act as the audience character where we're reflecting, and if he sympathizes with the main character, then we can sympathize with the main character, and it's a little easier that way. But the film seems to want to keep the narrative very insular to this one kid, and I feel like I feel like what was the point of even setting up the friend character if we weren't going to use him? He feels like he's only there to set up conflict later in a later scene at another location.
Yeah,
but I can kind of get it from an artistic level, I suppose. The acting in the film, there's not a whole lot of actors that I recognize other than Christopher Lloyd. Doc Brown's in it. And I like him. Of course I like him in it. Me and Kyle were having this running joke of just like, man, is it just me, or is Christopher Lloyd looking a lot more like Bernie Sanders?
Yeah.
The more the film went on, the more he became Bernie Sanders.
The more closer to death he became.
Yes.
I mean, it's pretty accurate.
The worse Christopher Lloyd looked, the more accurate his Bernie Sanders impression was. It was like, you know, American Horror Story. They're going to do the
election,
like the Trump election season next time, I'm like, oh, you got to get Christopher Lloyd to play Bernie. You got to do it. You got to do it. So I was having fun with that. How about you guys, before we go into a spoiler section, like, what do you feel about some strengths and weaknesses of the film?
Well, I don't know if you guys had this problem or not, but I had to jack up my TV's volume to hear anything in this movie. I don't know if it's just my Netflix account or what.
The sound design is very minimal. There's not a whole lot... there's not a whole lot visually... there's a lot of visually going on, and then audio, like, there's no one's talking a lot.
I mean, if so many of these old people, including, obviously Doc Brown, who's just whispering the whole entire time, and I'm just like, I had to turn subtitles on for sometimes, where I'm just like, I can't understand you. I'm not going to turn the sound louder than it already is.
Yeah, and then, of course, with the scares later, they jack up the sound again, so...
There was a lot of the transitional shots ran long for me, and it seemed to make the movie drag where it didn't have to.
Yeah, and I'm gonna get into that in a little. And right now, why not?
Yeah, it's not a spoiler to say that the transitional shots were bad.
Yeah, because to Kyle's point, my biggest problem with this film actually is the cinematography, and I'm gonna explain why. Because Kyle is right on the money with the transitional shots. They're too long. They take too long, and then they're not even properly framed.
No.
Framed right. We are constantly looking at the wrong part of the screen. And I'm gonna bring up a specific scene to kind of give an example. There's a scene where he is hunting the serial killer, and he's kind of got him in his sights. He's kind of trying to
stalk him,
and he's dancing in the background. Like, this serial killer's at this dance thing, and he's dancing in the background, and the background's out of focus, and the midground in focus, there's a guy at the bar, center frame.
Yeah. He is the focus of the shot.
He's the focus of this shot, and I'm like, oh, well, is that our main character? No, because it switches to the B shot, which is our main character looking sideways on the character, which would indicate that he's looking at him through the left. So whoever this random character is that's in center shot has nothing to do with the film.
No.
And it would be
that entire bar scene was weird.
And then that would be one thing if it was just one quick shot, but they keep switching from the A shot, which has that guy in the middle, to the B shot, which is our hero looking at them, and it keeps switching back and forth. And I'm like, what do you? Every time you switch to the shot, my eye is immediately drawn to the guy in the middle, and then I have to switch to the back to actually figure out what's important in the shot. Yep. And I'm like, and I know that it's this indie level of filmmaking, like, that is like, oh, well, what's important is kind of out of focus, and that's kind of supposed to be I'm breaking cinematography rules sort of thing.
A rule for a reason, guys.
Because it's hard for me to believe that he fucked up that shot multiple times to where that shot, like, it had to have been on purpose that he did that to intentionally disorient us. And that is dumb, and and I know it's a very specific example in the film, but it is where it's most egregious, but it happens throughout the rest of the film too.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely correct. Where I just kind of started not paying attention to the actual screen. I was still listening to the movie because the actual narrative was fairly interesting, but the actual scenes that were going on were so jarring that it actually gave me a headache to watch it sometimes.
Well, it's like, I can accept that the character doesn't talk a lot, and there's a lot of visual storytelling going on. That makes sense. But when when the story hinges on visual storytelling, when my eye is constantly being drawn to the wrong part of the screen, where the important shit is happening off on some other corner of the screen, but I'm constantly having to readjust every time we switch shots, and it became ungodly frustrating. And Kyle is right. The transitional shots extend the movie, like they add time and just kind of make it feel longer than the movie actually even is.
Yeah, it's only about an hour and 45 minutes, but they also could have shaved a lot of time off of that.
Yeah, they really could have shaved it down. And me and Kyle watched it together, and I think we were looking at each other at the end, and it's like, man, this second act just feels super long, and But yeah, that's I think that's where my main frustration with this film is just on that technical level. I don't understand what the decision making was for the cinematography. Maybe he's not it was directed by a guy named let's see here. I got the Billy O'Brien, and he's directed a couple of things before, not a lot. He's directed a movie called The Hybrid, Ferocious Planet, which was a TV movie. It looks kind of like, some other kind of horror / sci-fi stuff. And it could just be his cinematographer is something was lost in translation with him. But when it's on this level, it feels intentional.
Yes.
So I don't know if I can give him that credit on it. And I don't like it. I don't, because there's certain, you can break rules in filmmaking, but sometimes you have to have a reason to break a rule, and I feel like that bar scene specifically, there is no reason for it other than to intentionally disorient us. It's supposed to be building up tension between him and this serial killer he's chasing, so it's like, oh man, he might be onto him, he might be catching him, is he staying too long? But we're not focused on that because we're focused on this whatever dude doing whatever at the bar because he happens to be center frame and in focus. But yeah, that's basically where I have to come down on the film pretty hard, because this film reminds me a lot of something like Horns, where I'm like, oh, this is kind of an interesting, Horns is an interesting, ultimately failure. It's not...
That was our first Netflix and kill.
It was our first Netflix and kill.
Flashback!
And it's hard for me to call that film a failure because I actually I watch it multiple times, and I actually find myself watching it over and over again intentionally because I enjoy so many things about it. But ultimately, it's a very interesting film on a narrative level, and it's ambitious. And this one is kind of the same thing for me, except for the fact that it's just amateurishly shot.
Yeah, I don't think it's as rewatchable as, say, Horns.
No, not nearly at all. So that's why I'm going to have to give this one a...
Well, I still have a couple of things to talk about.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were.
I guess I'll just add one more thing: is that there's a point near the very end where they do a really cool practical effect, and then they follow it up with a really bad CGI effect.
Yeah, it was an odd decision.
That scene just keeps going, and I'm like, why are we still like, guys? What are you doing? What's going on?
And there was a little bit of CG in the beginning of the movie too, but it's sparsely used and actually pretty cleverly used.
The first time I saw it when they first revealed what the twist is, essentially, I was like, I actually had to rewind. I'm like, wait, what the fuck was that?
Yeah, right.
I'm like, okay,
fast.
It was really it was a pretty cool scene actually.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I gotta agree with Kyle. That last shot it's another one where I'm like, why did we make this decision that should be really obvious that we should have done something else?
Mm-hmm.
But
I don't know.
Yeah, that's where I come down on it. Travis, do you have anything last minute to add before we do ratings and go to a spoiler section?
No, not so much. That was Kyle brought up a good point that I kind of did forget was that last little scene. We're like, yeah, that was jarring.
Well, it wasn't really the last scene. The last scene, I think, the last shot was actually fairly clever.
No, that
was which was a certain instrument going with the music.
Yeah.
But the climactic scene.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, the our final money shot, if you will.
Yes.
But yeah, more or less, I guess we'll start with ratings, and we'll start with me. Yeah, this is like I said, that the technical things on this are just, it brings it down, and if the premise wasn't actually engaging and that twist wasn't in there, and I do want to give it points on being pretty neat with its narrative and trying new things, but I can only give it, say, a 2 out of 5. Because I would say a 3 out of 5, I'd be like, oh, I would go and, rewatch that again. And I'm like, I don't think I'm going to ever rewatch this again. But Kyle, what'd you think overall?
Around the same. I was quite bored. By the way, I have the kid's name, the main actor's name is Max Records.
Max Records?
Yeah.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
And he's the kid from Where the Wild Things Are.
Yes?
Yeah. He's grown so big.
Man, he's grown so big.
Yeah, a lot of the movie actually kind of bored me. I was kind of slogged down by the transitional shots and like we're staring at an alarm clock for a little bit and nothing's changing. It's not really adding too much to the story. A lot of things could have changed to make this thing seem to move much faster. I think there were a lot of interesting things about it, like the cool practical effects. I liked the twist in the story and Christopher Lloyd, and I think the acting was pretty good in it. But overall, I didn't enjoy it that much, and that's ultimately where you have to come down on a movie.
True.
So I have to give it a 5, where it's almost there. It's almost got a lot of things going for it, but not enough.
Yeah.
So I give it a 5 out of 10.
Yeah, definitely a mixed bag. I have to agree. Travis, what do you think?
I did like same as you guys. I liked aspects of this movie. I did kind of like how they portrayed sociopathy as being actually like it's a mental disorder. He's actually got something that he's working towards. He recognizes it as a fault, and he's got
Gotta like how he's working at it.
Yeah, he's actually he's got rules. He's trying to actually help himself through this. So it's actually a fairly interesting character piece that way. The twist kind of makes it more interesting because otherwise the movie would be way too cut and dry. It might have been just a biography then instead.
Right.
Like I said, my main problem was this. You guys have complained about the shots, which are very bad at times, but I just didn't like the sound design a lot of times, where I just found it jarring and like how much I had to turn up my TV. Overall, though, it wasn't a bad movie. I thought it had potential, just kind of needed to go a little bit more. So I was kind of waffling on what I was actually going to give this movie rating, and I'm probably actually going to, for actually one of the few times, going to follow Kyle. I'm just going to go 5 out of 10.
All right. Yeah, I think that's it's a fair thing to say that it does have ambition, and I think it really could have been something a little more special if it just was
more special.
a little. It was just if it was just a little more refined. And to your point about him being portrayed as a sociopathy, sometimes we'll get into it in the spoiler section, but sometimes that seems to flop around a little.
Towards the end, it gets a little bit muddled.
But we'll get there. With that, I think we'll take a small break. We'll come back.
Next film.
Oh, that's right. The film we have to pick it. Travis, what will be our next Netflix and kill?
Well, you won't actually have to get angry and override me this time because this is a film you actually like.
Yay!
We're gonna watch. Lucky Number 11.
Lucky Number. Oh my god, that's one of my faves. I love that.
But I have not seen it.
With Bruce Willis? With Bruce Willis in that?
I have not seen it.
Doesn't that have a lot of people in it?
It's got Bruce Willis, Ben Kingsley, Morgan Freeman. I have to bring out my Morgan Freeman and have him talk about the shmoo.
The shmoo?
The shmoo. He talks about the shmoo a lot in that film, actually. That's a fun one. I cannot wait. So join us next time for that. And join us if you are interested in the spoiler section after this small musical break. We'll be back right after this.
Baby, I'm a sociopath. It's serial killer on the warpath. I love you just a little too much. I love you just a little too much. You can see me drinking cherry coke. It's serial killer. I like to love notes. You know I love the thrill of the rush. You know I love the thrill of the rush.
And we're back, and we're going to talk about the spoiler section for I Am Not a Serial Killer. Spoiler, he is not a serial killer.
He isn't a serial killer.
They spoil it right in the beginning of the title. But the serial killer he's hunting, I made the guess early, and Kyle can attest to this, is that I'm like, okay, there's no reason for Christopher Lloyd to be in this movie if he's not the serial killer. Right?
Yeah. I mean, to be fair.
There's one recognizable actor in it, and it's Christopher Lloyd, and I'm like, okay, he's gonna be the serial killer.
Isn't that a rule for a lot of the NCIS type shows?
Yeah, Law and Order. It's like,
he wasn't just a serial killer.
Okay.
He was what if the Jeepers Creepers monster fell in love.
Okay, when Kyle explains the story like that, it sounds way more interesting.
Kyle, what have we told you on making premises better than they actually are?
Well, that's kind of what the premise is.
I kind of want to watch a reality show now where the Jeepers Creepers monster gives roses.
Bachelorette style?
Yeah, Bachelorette style, like, yes. But to different heroin survivors.
Aww.
Jamie Lee Curtis from the Halloween films. You have the final rose is for you. But yeah, he follows out Christopher Lloyd and this other creepy dude out to where they're trying to ice fish or whatever.
Yeah, they're like the person they were trying to say was probably the serial killer.
Yeah, and then it pulls a flip on you, and Christopher Lloyd does some sort of arm extend blade thing.
Yeah.
And murders that guy cold-blooded and...
Actually not cold-blooded, because the other guy was also trying to kill him.
Yeah, and rips out his lungs and, like, transports his lung into him so he can breathe easier. Because we figure out that Christopher Lloyd is this, what do you call it, like some sort of fairy goblin thing.
I don't know.
And he needs to, the only way he can survive, inside this human body, this human host, is to keep supplementing it with,
different body parts.
With healthier body
organs.
Yeah, and then, you know, over the course of our character's investigation, he's thinking, like, why doesn't he just get a new host? Why doesn't he just get a new body? And it comes to a head where he realizes, like, oh, and he doesn't quite realize it because he, you know, as his character, he doesn't understand the concept of loving someone enough to
sacrifice
for them. And our monster fell in love with this with his wife, and that's why he has to use the same body. Otherwise, otherwise he can't be with her. So. That's a very interesting narrative thing there too.
Actually kind of cool.
I thought that was very interesting, and his therapist is the one that has to explain it to him in that context, and that was very neat. And you know, the CGI that they use is pretty effective. Like these Christopher Lloyd has these weird alien sucker arms, like that he murders cops with.
Yeah. Well, that was actually one of my favorite scenes. Like, the first thing the character does, like, oh, I'm gonna fucking call the cops.
Yes! And then that's what was interesting too, because I'm like, oh, you're not like fully a sociopath, because your initial instinct was to call the cops. And one could argue that maybe it was to see what the guy would do when the cops were called upon him.
Yeah.
But even later he clarifies, like, I tried to help that guy, and like, from the way the character was acting, it seemed like, oh, that guy's in trouble, I should call the cops. And that was like an initial reaction for him, is that someone was in danger, and he decided to try and help them. And I'm like, oh, so he does have at least a little bit of empathy. He can understand, like, otherwise he would have just watched that person get murdered.
Right.
And learned more, you know, about our adversary. And then later, you know, our character does get angry. But, you know, that's not uncommon for sociopaths. They do get angry, especially when they're confronted with things that they don't understand. They get frustrated more. Well, I guess they get, like, frustrated more than anything else. I'm like, I'm not sure. I'm not a therapist. I dated one for a while, and they tried to explain it to me. I don't know why they were so insistent upon it, or why they made me take that test. But
we won't get into that one.
But yeah, he mentions later to his mom, like, yeah, if someone's killing him and I don't care if you're next. I'm like, I don't think that's true. You seem like you care.
Yeah.
Like, so, a little inconsistent, but that could have worked if we had known more about the character and his internal struggle, what he was going through.
Right.
But
more internal dialogue.
Yeah. And our friend character, like, he gets chased by Christopher Lloyd at one point, and he has to take refuge in his friend's house, in his friend's basement, and a weird, like, dialogue exchange happens where it's like, I haven't seen you in a while, what have you been up to? And it's like, you kind of realize, like, oh yeah, this character has not been in the film for a long time, and it's like, oh yeah, it's weird that he has not confided in his friend about hunting this monster. And he has this weird conversation of like, oh, I broke my rules because I need to hang out with you because it keeps me normal.
Yeah.
Like, he breaks it down to him on this kind of cold level.
Yep.
And is like, oh, that's the only reason you hang out with me? Well, then fuck off and leave then. And I was kind of like, oh, well, that's also interesting, but it would have more weight if I hadn't forgotten that character fucking existed.
Right.
Like, I was like, oh yeah, this guy. And then the relationship kind of implodes, and I was like, it would have carried a little more weight if
you need a third scene or just a couple like extra parts of the scene.
Yeah, so that he's a little more reinforced. I remember he's a thing in the movie. But it's actually an interesting idea of like, you know, he was being honest with his friend for probably like the first time of just like, why, like, hey, why do you hang out with me? It's like, well, because that's what normal people do, right? Like, and it was, you know, kind of that cold logic of it, and like, of course, his friend has like that, like, wow, that's really shitty, actually.
Let's not forget the fact that his mom's dating his therapist.
Yeah, that's fucked up. that's kind of messed up right there.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mean to tell that guy how to do his job, but
You're probably doing it wrong.
Yeah.
well, there's a certain level of trust you need to have with your therapist. Right. I don't know if I can trust somebody that's banging my mom. I mean, I feel like that would create some sort of conflict between us.
Mm-hmm.
But
conflict of penis.
Yeah, and then his friend's dad gets killed. Because Christopher Lloyd was hunting for him, and he's getting so desperate to murder people that he's kind of just fucking up and making mistakes.
Although, why did they fucking give this sociopath like a ski mask as a present?
I don't know.
That seems like a terrible idea.
It wasn't a ski mask. It was a panda mask.
Yeah, it was a panda thing.
It was cute,
but it was essentially a ski mask.
Yeah, it's one of those cute robber things,
right?
You know, like those ironic bank heists. But yeah, and then he does try and help his friend's dad, or try and deprive his body from being eaten by Christopher Lloyd, at least. So again, he tries to help out another person, and then it kind of culminates in this plan of him trying to make the monster angry enough to where he would make a mistake, because he realizes he needs to keep feeding in order to survive. So it's like, okay, if I can make this guy fuck up and then make sure he does not get what he needs to survive, I can like force him into either making a mistake or going way too long without feeding and then making him weak and killing him effectively. So he does that with it, like his wife, like he pretends to, like, he takes a couple of pictures of like the wife to make the guy angry, and it looks like it almost goes too far, and like that's kind of scary because it's like, oh shit, and he even calls his therapist like, oh god, I went over the edge, I did it, I didn't mean to do it, but I've gone like, and you can feel like he's afraid of, like, he's crossed that line, and like he can't go back, like, oh shit, and then the relief when she finally takes a breath afterwards,
and she starts yelling in her sleep.
I was just like, oh, okay. So that was cool, but it leads to our therapist being murdered by Christopher Lloyd.
Yep.
And I was just, and then it's like, oh, now it's on, like now it's personal, and that was interesting because he's very visually upset by his therapist killer.
I really like the church scene where it's like, you attacked my wife, you killed my therapist. They're having this conversation in a fucking church pew.
That was pretty cool because they're having like this final confrontation where Christopher Lloyd has gone too long without eating, and he can't go out in the open, and he's like, okay, I need that body. Where did you hide the therapist? And it's like, I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to lock you into this funeral home, and I'm going to keep you in here until you basically decompose or whatever the hell it is you do. Mm-hmm. But he messes up because he doesn't realize his mom is in there, taking care of some other stuff for funeral arrangements and stuff, and he is like, oh shit, because we totally forgot to mention that his mom is the mortician. Yes. It runs the morgue.
Yeah, so he's a sociopath who works at a funeral home.
Yep, he helps with the embalming and stuff, and he makes funny jokes.
Right. Which,
he is quite a clever kid.
Yeah, you'd think even, when you do a job like that, after a while you'd get used to it, and you'd make a joke about it like that. That in itself isn't the weird behavior. Nope. It's like, no, after a while it just becomes another job.
Normalizing repetition is pretty common human behavior.
Yeah, and it's like... And like he even made a couple good jokes too, because I was like, yeah, you got to give him that one. It was funny. Come on. I mean, the dead person's not going to care.
Right, yep. The family might care if they heard it, but they're not here.
Yeah, they're not here. So yeah, there's the final confrontation in the morgue, and Kyle can attest that I called this too, where in the first, the first couple scenes in the morgue in the first act of the film, we see a close-up shot of this, this like lift thing where it lifts the body up from the table, and it zoomed in on the shot and it lingered there again.
And you're like, somebody's gonna die on that.
I'm like, someone's getting hit in the face with that thing. Like someone's gonna get that. Like that's gonna be used as a weapon later.
Yep.
And yeah, it does good because he he saves his mom from being eaten by Christopher Lloyd by nailing him with that thing, and like it's a brutal hit.
Yeah.
Like it was pretty brutal, and I love the mom's reaction too. It's just like she does wake up and it's like, the fuck is going on?
I mean, she reacted pretty well, all considering.
Well, she does the thing of like, okay, I gotta go call the cops. Like, no, don't call the cops. We need to take care of him. We'll take care of this right now. We need to drain his blood and do the morgue thing of like, and inject him with Pepto-Bismol or whatever it is.
Yeah, what does it look like?
And now this is where we can bring up what Kyle was saying before, the really cool practical effect work of Christopher Lloyd kind of doing this decomposing thing where his blood is being poured out of his body and it's being replaced, and it's like this gross, like, oh god, like this, like life being sucked right out of him thing.
And it's like he turns into charcoal and just dissolves away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's like, oh my, ooh, that was a pretty cool, gruesome effect.
And then
this goblin thing flops out. And he decides like, oh, I can no longer be with the woman I love. Here, let me stab myself and kill myself so that I can go, be with her in the afterlife. Maybe. I don't know.
I don't even know what that was.
I to be honest, I wasn't really paying attention to the dialogue because the whole time I was just looking at the screen. I was like, whoa! Maybe we should have saved on the CG budget and just stuck with the practical Christopher Lloyd dying thing.
Yeah.
I feel like there was that said everything that needed to be said about that death.
Mm-hmm.
The CGI goblin thing does not really add anything other than the self-sacrifice thing, which I thought was weird and unnecessary, to be honest. But, we end on a happier-ish note of, the Kyle saying like the final shot of working in the morgue and
on his therapist who his mom was dating.
Yes, and
happy scene.
And but he's smiling, and the thing starts to the metronome thing that pumps the blood or whatever starts to chime into the rhythm of Spirits in the Sky.
Yep.
And I'm like, we're not watching a Guardians of the Galaxy trailer. Why am I hearing Spirits of the Sky right now? And so, like, again, like, there are neat elements into this. I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting story element. I like that. But then it's harped on by, like...
It's just kind of bogged down.
Just because the cinematography problems are within the third act stuff as well, too. Like, the only scene that's really well shot is like that end scene where we watch Christopher Lloyd dying, and I was just like, okay, yeah, this camera's nice and center focused, and we're focused on everything we should be. Hooray!
You did the bare minimum.
But with that, I think we can wrap this one up. I think we spoiled everything we wanted to spoil, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we got it. Anyway, if you'd like to check out some of our other content, our other Netflix and Kill episodes, you can check out our backlog on iTunes and Stitcher. Has our regular Yu-Gi-Oh! Episodes on there too. If you're interested in suggesting a Netflix and Kill movie for us, we would like to take any suggestions, and those you can email to us at unapologeticgeekout@gmail.com, or maybe give us a Facebook message, maybe a like while you're there. You can hit us up on Twitter at Yu-Gi-Oh! Podcast. Instagram's the same thing. And if you would like to help out the podcast with some visibility stuff, you can give us a review on iTunes and give us a 5-star review, and we will read whatever goes in that 5-star review box on the air, word for word. That is my guarantee. So if you want to proclaim one of us to be a serial killer and accuse one of us
Kyle,
specifically... Yeah, if you want to accuse one of us, we have to read that accusation on the air. So, hey... Get your incrimination on. I want to hear it. But yes,
Nick just looks at us. You guys are pointing on an audio format.
Visual jokes.
Everyone knows who we're pointing at. Let's face it.
Who loves visual jokes on a podcast? Raise your hand.
I do.
Yeah. See how that does not work. But yes, join us next time for lucky number 11. And until then, we are on Unapologists Geek Out, and we're out.